pollinators any more than exotics or agricultural like plants. Is that for pollinators or also for like caterpillars or larvae, or is it exclusively just for pollinators?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, so this is very important. Little detail I left out. So the study that I did only looked at adult pollinators, right? So we're thinking about adult bees, adult butterflies that are visiting the gardens. So we're just thinking about if it's an exotic or if it's a native plant. Are we going to see more with an exotic or more with a native? So that's really where it doesn't appear to make a difference. So just for visitors, not for all sorts of other things like how good really is it for them or does it improve their survival? We don't know any of that. Yeah.
Given constraints of time and space, what would your recommendation of plants be for a typical backyard garden?
Great question. So the question was what specific plants I would recommend for a backyard garden here in Athens. Can I give you a list later? Because there are lots of wonderful, I do also like native plants. There are lots of wonderful plants, echinacea, those type of plants.
I'm just thinking of maximizing pollinator plant interaction.
Yes, so if you want to maximize interactions, I would recommend making sure you have a mix of plants that will act as caterpillar host plants. So those are the ones that you can put in your garden and butterflies will come and lay their eggs on it. And plants that will just serve as nectar sources. So diversity. Gentlemen in the back. Is it legal to have beehives in Athens? Does anybody know the answer to that? Yes. It is. Yes, you can have urban bees. But here's the thing. Your bees will be better off if they are out in the country. Because out in the country, there's going to be higher diversity of plants overall. And I have bees, that's why I know this, because I want to keep my bees as healthy as I can. My bees are in Bogart. They do super well. What happens out in the country is you have higher diversity, and when they collect pollen from diversity of plants, their immune system seems to be doing better, and so overall they benefit from having that instead of having fewer plants out here in the city. So the question was if we can just put out a bowl of sugar water for pollinators. So nectar is sugar water, but it has a lot more than just sugar in it. It has a lot of nutrients in it as well. So it's not the same thing. Here, certainly it's having real flowers is superior. And also because of that pollen piece where, it's that protein that bees can collect for their larvae. So, but yeah, you can see things come and treat it. You may have some success, right? So that's why we'll see, when we have those hummingbird feeders, ants will come, bees will come. Yeah.
You talked earlier about the pesticides and neonics, and I guess my question, because I was surprised about the amount of residential use also, compared to agricultural. I guess what exactly is the motivation for using those kinds of pesticides in your residential garden, and then what would alternatives be if your motivation really is so strong that you need to get rid of a certain type of bug or something?
So I think that there's a couple of thoughts. The reason why residential areas use so much neonics, I think it's because the instructions aren't necessarily really good on those containers that you can buy at Home Depot. And so people also think like, well, if I just double the dose, or spray it twice, I will really kill this thing. I've seen those things used most commonly on roses to get rid of aphids, to get rid of those little bugs that are, we don't think of them as, beneficial insects. Sort of safe alternatives for neonics, I would say there aren't a whole lot of them. That's the honest truth. There are, natural organic recipes. There are soaps that you can spray, leave it on for half an hour and wash it off, which is literally just a soapy solution. And it mechanically will kill, the aphid if that's what you're trying to get rid of. That's a lot of work. It's a lot more work than just scrub it. So.
Is there anything that you can do to get, like, I don't have a small garden, but I also have a railing because it's actually pretty bad by partner bees. Is there anything that you can do to try and prevent partner bees from going after certain structures without damaging other pollinators?
I would say there really isn't. So this is kind of my own observation. For the most part, pressure-treated wood is not attacked. If wood is painted, sometimes they don't attack. I personally just have like a log of, something I got at Lowe's, just a piece of wood that I let them have. But no, they're pollinators, so I'm going to say no.
Since you said diversity of food source is important for bees, what would be the best thing for commercial pollinators to do instead of going from doing one plant and moving around the country? Is there a best way to promote bee health in terms of how often it does a single plant pollination?
So are you asking what would be best for honeybees?
Sure.
In terms of what plants they're visiting,
Well,
or I just not clear on the
The
question.
fact that honeybees are taken from pollinating one crop to the next, and so they're exposed to a single source for a long period of time.
Yes.
Is there a best way to diversify? They do one plant for 2 months and then wild the rest of the year for their health.
Right, so for their health, as I mentioned
Yeah.
before, the best thing is for them to have a diversity of flowers they're visiting. Whenever they're just on one single crop, then they, I think, become more susceptible to diseases. So diversity. So, sorry, there's a gentleman here that had a question.
The neonics, to avoid using those products, it has to recognize the presence of neonics on the product label. Is it described in the product use, or is it described just in the active ingredient part?
Yeah, so they would be an active ingredient, and it would be, so as I mentioned, there are several names for neonics.
Are they trade names or human products?
They're not trend names. They're one of those convoluted names that you can't pronounce.
So how do you recognize the neonic for that?
So what you have to do is look it up online, get a list of it, and make sure that if you go and buy something, that it's not one of
You can't do it
those.
like stated there in the store.
It won't be as easy at the store. No, they're not labeled with big red letters, neonic.
So, are there like long-term projections as to how bad this pollinators is going to get, return practices?
Yeah, I don't know of a study that has done a projection. As of right now, there's actually been a fight to try to prove that there are declines. Part of the problem is that we didn't think 50 years ago that we should be monitoring bumblebees, right? So so now sort of in hindsight, we're trying to scramble up data and figure out we know that there is less, but how do we, show the data? How do we provide the evidence that it's, show numbers that it's actually declining. Yeah, it doesn't look really good because I don't see us using any less neonics in our agricultural fields anytime soon. I don't see us decreasing our urban growth or our agricultural needs. So this is why gardens would be really kind of amazing if we can figure out how to make them really good for pollinators so that we could provide that habitat elsewhere.
So I recently saw, and I don't 100% remember where, a paper or a news article about Japan making tiny robotic drone pollinators. And I didn't read into depth, so I have no clue if it was like, I mean, I'm 99% sure it wasn't an Onion article, but how realistic is that as a solution to this problem? Or is that just kind of like some people having, doing some interesting research, but it's not actually going to solve things?
Have you seen Black Mirror?
They make me think of that, and all of this. Yeah, it was like clarify that.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I can tell you that in China, they had such bad pollinator laws at some point that they sent out people with little brushes to pollinate apple orchards. Turned out actually that they had a higher apple yield because of that, which was not terribly great news. Of course, pollinators tend to be free. You have to pay people to go out and pollinate. But it seems that we may have to start coming up with these creative alternative solutions, and some of them are going to work really well. Some might not. They're going to cost us a lot of money. In the end, it's all about money, right? So pollinators are providing a free service. I mean, it's billions and billions of dollars we're talking about. So somebody's going to have to pay.
Your theme of replacing habitat in gardens is real similar to Doug Tallery's idea with bringing things home. You read that book?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Doug Tallery's book, Bringing Things Home.
Bringing Nature Home by Doug Tallery. Yes, it's an excellent book.
It's the same kind of thing about using gardens to replace habitat, but that's his main idea.
Yes, and one other thing that I should mention is that, and maybe I did, but yeah, we're still sort of in the beginning stages of understanding how gardens can act as conservation tools. So there's still a lot we don't know, and we need to be doing a lot more experimental work. And I think that answering some of this question is really going to take quite some time, and it's going to take a huge effort. I actually have one more slide that I wanted to encourage you all to think about how you can contribute to science on pollinators. And there are actually tons of, they're called citizen science projects out there that are trying to quantify and understand pollinators using gardens, or some aspect of it, or just pollinators using different habitats. So there's Great Sunflower Project, there's Monarch Number Monitoring, something called Native Buzz out of Florida, and our very own Project Monarch Health here at UGA. It's about monarchs and it's protozoan and parasite.
So in the West Coast, we have a lot of rooftop gardens. I'm curious about how the height of those buildings and gardens up there will have access for bees.
Yeah, so the question was if we have rooftop gardens, how they're going to affect bees being able to access them. Yeah, so basically the higher the garden is, the harder it is for them to go up there. Another kind of important aspect of rooftop gardens is that they tend to be super, super windy and dry. Tend to be, of course not all. But the higher you go, your you're going to have different conditions that the pollinators are experiencing. So there's also some special plant selection for those maybe needed. Yes, so there are lots of hybrids, horticultural hybrids, that are created so that they look pretty to us, so that we buy them, but they can be completely useless to pollinators because they have either reduced access to the nectar or complete blockage of access. So yeah, that's a really good point. There are lots of hybrids that are not so great, and others that seem to be okay. So the closer you are to sort of the wild type, the better off. It's hard to kind of tell just looking at a plant if you go to a garden center, is this going to be super useful for my pollinators? I'd say that the best thing you can do is try to go with like the original wild, as much wild as possible, species as possible. Thank you.
So say like a perfectly designed pollinator garden, how does that compare to what would just be in that spot naturally? Could it be better, perhaps, or?
Yes, that's another one of my questions that I didn't list there, but I've been thinking about a lot. Right, would it be better to have something wild completely than having something that we create? Yeah, perfectly designed. And so my feeling is that the wild natural is always going to be hands down better, especially when we think about how much work people do in their gardens, how much they mess with their gardens. I mean, gardening is considered an exercise for a reason, right? Because people go in and they dig and they pull things out and they mulch and they hopefully don't spray pesticides, but they're out there doing things. And whenever we are disturbing a habitat, we are potentially disturbing the insects and sort of the natural balance that's in there. So
Seems like there could be a trade-off though. You could have more higher diversity in a small area than would be achieved.
yes, you could have higher diversity, absolutely. But at the same time, if you think about it, yeah, it could be a trade-off. But also, if you're attracting insects to a small area, you could then have like an all-you-can-eat buffet for predators as well, right? So you could. There's another trade-off to think about. Or you can, higher incidence of disease could also happen. But again, I'm kind of speculating because there's just not a lot of work done to support my speculations. There was one study done that looked at spiders. And so spiders, they all tend to be predators. And that increased with the number of flowering plants in a garden, which is what I found to increase the species, pollinator species diversity in the gardens. So there could be something happening there. Again, great projects for people to look into.
All right, we have time for just one more question.